Want to start him week one?
Look, I like his attitude. We're not automatically starting him just because he's the #1 pick and presumably our franchise guy going forward. We've seen guys develop at different rates. Now, he does have some traits that make me think he might step right in. He's, 3 years of college experience, playing at Indiana. You didn't, week in, week out, you didn't always have the superior talent around you, right?
That's right.
A lot of times it was inferior, your receivers, your running backs, your line and stuff like that. So that's good. And obviously he's a very smart player, has enough athleticism, processes quickly. So he might be ready to step right in and be effective. But I like the attitude of I'm not forcing him in there because Sam Darnold's an extreme matter, but there are a lot of other players. Drake May didn't start right away, all right, for Jacoby Brissett. So Mahomes obviously didn't start right away. I'm sure both of them could have, but they took their time with him and were patient with him. And he's going to, right now, what was a bad team last year. So maybe it's best. Now, I'm not against him going out there and struggling. I'm just saying if he's not checking all the boxes that make you feel like he's ready in training camp, throw Geno out there.
Well,
let Geno, and if Geno's bad again, then week 7 or 6 or whatever, you put Fernando in and you go from there. Or maybe it's longer. Maybe he sits a whole year. I'm not against that.
I totally agree with you. And I also think some of it's not entirely about how ready he is. It's also about I was obviously dead wrong about the Raiders last year, and Geno was not good, but also that offensive line was arguably the worst in football. That, to me, some of it was Geno was bad, but a lot of it was Geno's bad, but a fair amount of it was the offensive line. I still think Genty's going to be excellent. We'll see. I think he was drawing very thin with that O-line. If the Raiders are not, if they're spending #1 pick on quarterback, excellent offensive linemen very rarely come available via free agency. Pardon me. They have a lot of work to do there. So I'm not opposed at all to, even if Fernando's like, man, I think he is ready, saying, hey, let's give this offensive line some time to gel and mesh and figure that out. Which is why if I'm the Raiders, I do not cut Geno. I say, and Geno has, I think, the exact right disposition to help a young quarterback. And so I think Geno, he has a good contract with them. I think he would be a good soldier in that regard. And
I don't know if Geno thinks he's past his prime.
I don't think.
Yeah. I'm not going to spend much time trying to figure out exactly what the Raiders should do with Geno Smith in this hypothetical, because that's not really the core of the issue for me, to be honest. But if you actually listen to what the Raiders brass has been saying, their messaging wasn't really about Geno Smith himself. The underlying sentiment was more along the lines of wanting to have their young quarterback, Mendoza, out on the field whenever they feel they can properly support him. It's about building the infrastructure first. The situation with Patrick Mahomes was entirely different, and the situation with the Patriots and Drake May was different as well. In Kansas City, the calculus was, we want to continue to develop this raw, talented quarterback. And it's infinitely easier to sit a guy like Mahomes when you have Alex Smith already there, along with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. That team was winning games, winning playoff games, and consistently making deep postseason runs. They were already experiencing success. So, the decision to sit Patrick Mahomes for a year was a luxury, not a hardship. The Raiders do not have that luxury. They do not have that history of recent success. They are coming off a dreadful season. If they now trot out Geno Smith and he starts the season with a record of 1-6, it becomes exponentially harder for the coaching staff and front office to look at the locker room and say, yeah, we're going to keep sitting our first-round pick. We're committed to the long-term plan. That is an incredibly difficult sell. The patience that existed in Kansas City was directly correlated to winning. In the year that Mahomes sat, Alex Smith led the Chiefs to a 10-6 record, and they won their division. They were a top team in the NFL. If Alex Smith had started that season 1-6, you can be sure that Patrick Mahomes would have been under center much sooner. So, there's your context. I'm generally an advocate for not rushing the process with young quarterbacks. I also believe that the specific type of quarterback matters. From what I've seen of Mendoza, I think he's the kind of player who could have a season where he absolutely struggles, where he looks awful at times, and it won't permanently break him or derail his development. He has the mentality to handle adversity, but that doesn't mean you should seek it out. However, the overarching principle is this. When you have a prized pick, a #1 overall selection like Mendoza is projected to be, he is incredibly valuable to your franchise. He is, for all intents and purposes, the future of the organization. Unless you are absolutely certain that you are putting him in a position to succeed from day one, with a competent offensive line, playmakers, and a scheme that fits his skills, then I see no compelling reason to push him out onto the field just because you feel pressured by the draft capital you invested. The logic of, well, we drafted him first overall, so he has to play, is flawed. It is significantly harder to develop a quarterback when the team around him is a mess. Development requires a conducive environment. You need the right system. The Raiders appear to be addressing the coaching staff aspect of that, which is a positive step. But to me, that's what matters more than anything else. Putting the player in a position where success is achievable. Everything else is secondary. It is interesting to observe the shift in public opinion on this topic. I think a lot of people got fully on board with the idea of sitting a rookie for an entire year because of the Patrick Mahomes example. The thinking became, well, if it worked for Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, then it must be the blueprint for everyone. But that was an incredibly specific situation that is nearly impossible to replicate. It required a winning team, a stable veteran quarterback, and a roster loaded with talent. The Patriots, by contrast, were a mess. They were running around with their heads cut off, and they tried to rely on Jacoby Brissett as a bridge, which looked like a disaster. Yet, interestingly enough, Jacoby Brissett later went to the Arizona Cardinals and performed reasonably well. So a lot of it comes down to how well-run the organization is. It depends on the stability of the infrastructure and the quality of the development program. Think about it this way. Imagine a completely random, hypothetical scenario. Let's say the Cincinnati Bengals, in a universe where Joe Burrow doesn't exist, had been searching for a quarterback for a couple of years. They decide to bring in Joe Flacco as a veteran stopgap, and then they draft a rookie, let's call him Mendoza. In that scenario, you could clearly see that Joe Flacco, despite being a veteran past his prime, is still capable of having some success and providing some exciting moments. No one is confusing him for the long-term future of the franchise anymore. That much is obvious, but in that situation, there would be absolutely no issue with saying to the rookie, hey, you're going to sit for a year. You're going to learn everything. It would be accepted. The reason I value the sit and learn approach is that it allows the player to truly understand what it means to be a professional in the NFL. It gives them time to learn the speed of the game, the preparation required, and the nuances of being a pro without the pressure of performing on Sundays. It's why doctors and surgeons have residencies that last for years. They spend years observing, assisting, and learning before they are the ones holding the scalpel. Think about any well-run organization in any industry. When you start a new job, they don't throw you into the deep end on day one. They say, you're not going to do much today. You're not going to do much for the next few days. You're just here to sit, watch, and absorb. That's it. That's all we want you to do. And at the time, you might feel like, no, I'm ready. I can do this. And they say, no, just relax. No pressure, no stress. You're just here to learn and grow. I think that approach goes a very long way in building a solid foundation. So, when you're drafting a quarterback #1 overall, you're bringing in a new coaching staff and a new franchise cornerstone. The hype is real. The excitement is palpable. The motivation is there. Everything is in place for you to succeed. You just have to be smart about how you handle it. You have to be strategic in your approach. You don't need to worry about external pressures. You just need to focus on what puts your team, your quarterback, and your coaching staff in the best possible position to win. It really is that simple. It can't get any more straightforward. But again, the benefit Andy Reid had was that he could sell that patient approach to the locker room because Alex Smith was winning games and leading them to the playoffs. It's much harder to sell that same message to a team that is 3-9. Guys like Max Crosby aren't going to be patient. They're going to be asking, what are we doing here? I'm not here for a slow, steady rebuild with a rookie quarterback. I'm here to win now. You can't sell the long-term vision to a locker room that's losing. You can't sell it to the coaching staff either. It's a unique balancing act, and you have to know how to navigate it. You have to know how to approach it. That being said, I do think the Raiders are at least thinking about this the right way. Their mindset seems to be, we just want to make sure we have everything in place before we just throw our most valuable asset out there. Let's face it, a prospect like Mendoza is essentially a billion-dollar asset. That's what it boils down to when you consider the investment. If he becomes the player they hope he becomes, he himself will earn $1 billion over his career, let alone the value he brings to the franchise. We're talking about building a contender for the next 10-plus years. It makes perfect sense that you would want to be smart and strategic about how you handle that kind of investment. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Mendoza? Should he start week 1 if he's drafted number 1 overall? Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree, either way, let's get some discussions going. Let's have some debates, but ultimately, let's just have some fun with it. And please do consider subscribing to the channel. We're building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you be a part of it. I want to build something we all genuinely feel connected to, something we're really excited to be a part of. I think we're well on our way to doing that. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much.